Welcome to the first video on the official PBO channel of Week 1 Pickems.
Today I am Sunnyside Suicunes, brought along with
the St. Louis Solgallios, and first up is our Pickems for the Kalos division. So the first matchup is going to be Toronto Raptors versus the Kaborka Gangars.
This matchup is actually very interesting. We talking sad about like every matchup ahead of time, and this one was like it felt very polarizing. Comparatively to some other matchups. I mean, you have Valiant. Kaborka doesn't have a really good Valiant check. It's Toxapex, and then even then, Toxapex can get like whittled away, and if Valiant plays correct. So I think Kaborka has his work and check out of him, but what are your thoughts?
And then so the Valiant just kind of runs his team. It can definitely hit almost anything and everything super effectively with coverage, whether it wants to run booster special, booster speed to make sure it outspeeds anything that could be scarfed, as well as the defensive backbone of Latios with pivots. Gliscor can take most any hit from anything except for a Mamoswine, as well as the legendary dogs. Suicune just kind of sits there. Fortress on top of that, spin, and a good wall with only being weak to fire, which Kaborka doesn't really have access to. Even bringing Knuckle Stack, it can Terra Fairy and be really hard to deal with, and Salt Cure away a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, you had to pay the Knuckle Stack tax if you really want to do anything like that. Maybe that's what you have to do on Toxapex. Otherwise, like Knuckle Stack could like Terra Fairy or Terra something, and then just put Soul Cure on Toxapex, and then you have to switch it out, which lets Iron Valiant come in for free, and then it's much harder for Kaborka to play into this matchup. But they do have some great tools like the Mamoswine, like the previous mentioned Toxapex, great Tusk. I mean, I know that he is very like fond of his team, and I can definitely see the vision that he's going for. And I think this is just more so a bad matchup more than anything else.
For sure.
Florges can also put in some good work. It can, if it's a special Valiant, it might even be able to. Florges might be able to wall it. So I can definitely see the power of Kaborka's team. I just don't think it's a good matchup for him because again, his team doesn't get much access to fire moves, if any, which makes Fortress that much harder to like just get to deal with.
Yeah,
I think Mandibuzz gets Heat Wave maybe, if I had to guess, and that's about it. And if you're using Mandibuzz as an offensive problem, then
there's a bigger problem in that in itself.
Yeah.
So for this matchup, we've both decided on going at 70-30 in favor of the Toronto Raptors. Yep. Up next is the Tottenham Hoothoots versus the Tokyo Teddiers. So it's one of our game of the weeks. Tottenham, returning champ of Kalos, versus Tokyo, who dropped out last season but came back. And just looking at it, it's definitely in more so the favor of Tokyo. And purely because Chin Pao kind of runs his whole team between the Dragapult, Rillaboom, Clodsire, even weakening the defense of Snorlax and Bronzong, able to hit with both Ice and Dark moves respectively. On top of that, if Chimpa goes down, he also has Annihilate and Dragonite, Moth, Primarina, a bunch of big offensive threats, on top of Hippowdon, Dusclops, and Orthworm just being there to wall and do generally defensive things.
I mean, Tokyo definitely has way more tools at their disposal, and it's much easier for Tokyo to come into this battle and play like, all right, this is my win condition, now how do I build around it? While Tottenham has to come in this and be like, okay, how do I stop their win condition? How do I do this? How do I do that? Like, I think the fact that Tottenham has a lot more questions they have to ask themselves when drafting and when preparing for this battle than Tokyo does, that in itself, like, even though they are like a returning champion, they're struggling, right? Like they definitely have to struggle a bit when thinking about how to properly prep for this battle.
Oh yeah.
And I think Tokyo just has a much easier time doing so, which I think we both agree that it gives Tokyo the advantage.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, even Dusclops can just sit there and like Terra and
Wisp things, Hex things. Yeah, definitely very, very difficult to deal with. I have Tokyo predicted to win 55-45 because I think Tottenham is a good player, so it's going to give Tokyo a challenge, but I still think it is more so in favor of Tokyo.
And I gave it a 60-40, is that I have talked to Tokyo a few times, and he definitely has his head on his shoulders. And while I do believe, like, I do agree that Tottenham is a really good player, I don't think this matchup is in his wheelhouse per se. And I mean, again, like, sometimes you can be the better player, but if you don't have the right matchup, you're climbing a very tall, steep cliff.
Oh yeah. Up next is the Grossmore Growlers versus the Philadelphia Flagons.
This matchup is actually really interesting because I mean you have the Grossmorns like really hyper offense versus Philadelphia's more balanced style. Like Falcon definitely has a lot of heat though. Like you got Cinderace, Scizor, Ursaluna, Azelf, Mincho, and TOT, Thunder T. I mean, but he has some like regenerating pivots. So you know it's a more offensive pivoting core that has some defensive options. But with that said, I think ever so slightly Growlithe is an easier time building, and like I previously stated from the last matchup, sometimes you can win or lose a matchup just because of how easy it is. And in Kalos, not to dock on anyone's capabilities, but in Kalos, a lot of players are either new or returning, or maybe not quite there when you know maybe they have a few gaps in their strengths. And I think that's one thing to note about like this matchup is that even if I believe Flygons is actually the better player, I don't think the skill difference is enough to make up for the fact that I think Growlithe's matchup and Poke like the team that it's so hard. Like, how do you prep for Growlithe's team as a Kalos player that can kind of set up Vale, that can run you down with gouging or Wogerpon or Regieleki, Golden Go, things so on and so forth. So while I really, really like Flygon's team and Flygon as a player, I think for especially in Kalos, I think Growlithe comes in with a much easier time. But what do you think?
For sure, yeah. So yeah, that Ninetales getting Snow Up, getting Vale, is definitely a very tough time to deal with for Philadelphia. Setting up that Vale, having Gouging Fire and Ogerpon have boosted defenses, with both getting access to very good setup moves. Dragon Dance for Gouging Fire and Swords Dance and Trailblaze for Ogerpon is going to allow either of them to quickly boost their attacking stat and their speed, which is going to be a very big problem for Philadelphia's win conditions, which are like Ursaluna and Thundurus and Cinderace and Scizor, which Ogerpon deals with a lot of those really, really well, especially if it is behind Vale and it is boosted. And while they have that, they also have a Golden Go, Regieleki, Tornadus, which gives them options if they don't want to bring Ninetales into this matchup for speed control with Tornadus, Prankster, Tailwind, as well as if they do bring the Vale, then Golden Go can set up Nasty Plot, Hoopa Unbound can come in and click buttons, as well as Regieleki with Transistor Thunderbolts. It's definitely very tough for Philadelphia to plan for all of their offensive threats while having very easy buffed defenses in this matchup.
Yeah, I think we both agreed on like the favorites, and I think again it is close. I think while it is Growlithe's favorite, I think it is very, very close. Flygon definitely can make Growlithe eat our words and you know come out on top.
For sure, which is why we both gave it a 55-45 in favor of the Growliths. Up next is my match versus the Memphis Mad Cargos, and so that we get rid of all bias in any situations, I'm going to hand it over to Sunnyside to describe how this matchup's going to go.
Thank you. Yeah, this matchup was very interesting. Like turning off like the nameplates and just looking at the teams, it is a match where both players have a lot of strengths, and where Memphis has a lot of like top heavy with the Darkrai, Excalibur, and Specterior. I mean, those three are very hard to prep for. You have two really nice Swish setters in Jirachi Screamtail, Quagsire to stop any kind of prep setting up, and then Arcanine Hisui, which is sometimes always just what you need as a win condition. You can be 5-0. You could literally have the Macargos on its last Pokemon, and you have almost your entire team up and ready, and Arcanine can still come back and get 5 kills. So Macargo definitely has a lot of power, and I believe St. Louis has a lot to work through. But I still gave St. Louis the benefit because I think that St. Louis is a really good player. I think the fact that he has Stereo speed makes it so he can't really outrun him, like Macargos can't outrun him. He has the power of Psychic Terrain, Quick Quavo, Garchomp, Masquerada, and Omnamoris can all come in and literally stat check a lot of Memphis's Pokemon. Like, doesn't matter if they're defensive or offensive. Can really just put in so much work. I mean, you have so much balanced power. And then, as far as like even the lower tier mon, quote unquote, you have Overquill with Intimidate, Bellibolt to absorb hits, Kamala like with a 115 attack with like that has such a wide array of a move pool. It even has Wish itself. I think the matchup is definitely awkward. I was talking over this earlier before the videos that I think this matchup is awkward and it definitely can go either way. I, however, gave it a 60-40 in favor of St. Louis, just because I think that one, their skill caliber, I believe Macargos is definitely newer into the scene, as well as two, I think while the matchup is definitely awkward, and I can definitely see like St. Louis winning by only like a 2-0 or something like that, I do think St. Louis, once he gets in the driver's seat, should be relatively easy. I think he can run away with it.
All right. Next up is the Detroit Zoroarks versus the Boston Bayonets. And just looking at this right away, just the draft itself, Detroit has kind of, it almost seems very little synergy. They kind of just picked what was best where they picked at. A lot of things that do kind of their own thing could synergize well if he plays it right. But overall, I think that Boston having the very much more put together draft, a lot better synergized team, as well as I think overall just having the better Mons in this situation will definitely give him the edge over Detroit.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Boston's team is much more well put together, has a lot more options. I mean, Detroit has to come in and figure out, like, all right, what's 6 Pokemon? Because realistically, any of these 6 Pokemon could be coming in, and how does he prep for it? While Boston is looking at Detroit, I'm like, all right, yeah, bring that Bronzor. I dare you. Bring that Smirgle. I dare you. And so Detroit definitely has a much, much harder time building for this matchup, and not only that, but like so even if he figures out the team cohesion and how to make it all work, Boston still has such a huge defensive presence in Dondozo and Corviknight. Sorry, my bad. Wo-Chen and Revavroom, Dashbun, like he has such a defensive presence. And then if you think that, okay, well, he's just going to try and stall me out or try to absorb hits, you're then going to get smacked in the head with GU, Galvantula, Zoroark, Ursaluna especially, even like Tauros. And a lot of this defensive Pokemon can also pack a punch, even like Dondozo. So I think Boston just runs away with this battle. I think like if we're not really giving like in-game like differential scores, but if I had to, I would assume 4-0 for Boston Bonnets.
Mm-hmm.
And if Zoroark's were to come back with a win, I think it's like a 1-0. I think Detroit wins by like the skin of his teeth.
For sure. As well, we both have this at 70-30.
Yep.
On to the next matchup, Norwalk versus the Indianapolis Incineroars. You can go ahead and start this one.
All right. I believe that we have decided that this was like the biggest discrepancy as far as matchup goes. Not to say that one player is better or worse than the other. It's just I think this matchup is absolutely disgusting on paper, and I would not want to be on the Norwalks' point of view of this. I think that Indianapolis's defensive core is absolutely absurd, and then you can't even like. And even if you were to try and break through it, you still have to deal with Ogerpon. You kill some of his defensive Pokemon. You have to deal with Kingambit. You can't even like try to break through by setting up because he has Crocodile and Clefable. And even like his defensive Pokemon has so much power. Like Ting Lu with 110 base attack will hit you around. I mean, Iron Boulder, Excadrill is going to get smacked by ground types. He has Throat Chop for like Skeledirge. And then everything else is just going to take a lot of damage from just random moves that are going to be thrown his way. I think Norwalk is going to either get whittled down in a long, grueling battle, or is going to get smacked so hard within the first 12 turns, and it's just going to be a quick game. I don't think Norwalk has a lot of ways out unless he really pulls a rabbit out of his hat.
Yeah, for sure. Ting Lu definitely just runs his whole team. It not only takes out Excadrill, Boulder, Skeledirge, Glamora, but it also has rock coverage to hit Kyurem, Jugulis, and Kilowattrel, as well as having Throat Chop to completely negate Skeledirge's offense, and the ability to set up quickly whether Amon is pivoting out or staying in. Tinglu just hits everything so hard, and without the Sylveon there or Curum having the ability to be able to one-shot the Tinglu, it's definitely more so in favor, as well as just that entire defensive backbone of Torn T, Clefable, DOD. It's almost impossible for Norwalk to break through as long as Tinglu is there and alive.
Yeah, I mean, with 2 Regenerators, 2 Unaware, and then his defensive Pokemon, like, being able to break you, like, even to DOD being able to set up, it's not looking too good for Norwalk. I think Norwalk's a good player, but I don't think I don't think he's feeling good about himself after this matchup.
Yeah, which is why I have it at 85-15 in favor of Indianapolis.
And I have it at 80-20. I think Norwalk might have a chance. I mean, Iron Boulder can come up, and like, if Indianapolis kind of falls asleep at the wheel and Iron Boulder gets on the field, gets maybe a +2 or something, or gets boosted with booster energy and then starts smacking people. Because I mean, because Iron Boulder is faster than everything on Indianapolis's side, so I could definitely see a world where Iron Boulder comes in and really does a lot of damage. But in saying that, I'm not feeling it.
All right, in the next matchup, Glamorgan Vale Great Tusks versus the Ottawa Dawn fans, and this is the first matchup where the I think we feel that the better player is probably going to lose in a bigger fashion than what the rest do. Looking at both teams, that Walking Wake Slowking with Dawn Fan or Bombi are very, very scary for Glamorgan, considering Walking Wake takes out the Treads, the Talonflame, it can take out the Como-O, essentially anything except for the Comfey and the Slowking Galar. Slowking can't really touch Walking Wake in return, but Comfey does get Triage, which I feel like is going to be the only saving grace for that Walking Wake, seeing as Draining Kiss and his priority can always heal before Walking Wake gets a chance to hit it, and if Walking Wake cannot kill it in 2 times after Draining Kiss, then it is going to be very difficult for Glamorgan to find another switch into that Wake.
Yeah, I think this one was definitely tougher to like evaluate, because I mean, there is definitely I'm not 100% sure on Dawn Prince's skill, but as Great Tusk, I'm very aware of like how smart this man is, and so it is. I mean, not only that, but his draft is so good. I mean, he has so many different modes, both fast, slow, hitting hard, defensive. But I think at the end of it all, like, even with all those modes, the Dawn Fence really has a lot going for it. As you were saying, like, you were bringing up all those good points. I definitely give Great Tusk the edge, but it's barely, and I think it's mostly of a skill diff. And maybe, who knows, Dawn Fence might actually just be an insane caliber type of player, and it won't even matter. But it's definitely a hard one. Yeah, it's one of those. This game is very hard to evaluate, because in Kalos, it's really hard to tell, especially with new players coming in or returning players, how good someone really is, as well as we have never really seen any of these drafts come in action quite yet, so we don't know entirely of what everyone's capable of.
Yeah, for sure.
But Walking Wake, I mean, in the rain is just too much, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Sometimes.
So I feel like the matchup is definitely in Ottawa's favor, and has the most potential to ruin Glamorgan's day. I think Glamorgan, coming off of a championship loss last season, and him wanting to prove that he is the better Donphin. Donphin should have stayed in the past and not evolved. We have it at 55-45 in favor of Glamorgan.
Yes.
Now on to Unova in the first matchup of Sunnyside Suicunes and the Abbotsford Agrons. Seeing as we are keeping it, yep, unbiased, I will go ahead and take this one over. And looking at the matchup, Ogerpon and Ursaluna and Ninetales. As we discussed earlier, Ogerpon behind a Vale is insane, as well as Ursaluna being as tanky as it is and being able to also set up and go in and sweep stuff is such an invaluable presence, especially against things like a Skeledirge, Electrode, against a Terra Hariyama. Even a Hydrapple, Meowscarada, and Gliscor, considering Ursaluna gets Ice Punch. It is definitely a very tough time to switch into. Again, especially if it gets set up, not only as well being able to set up against Skeledirge, it does get Slack Off, so it's going to be a little bit of a tank fest, but having that power behind the Vale is very, very valuable. Looking at Abbotsford side, he kind of just has to rely on getting a crit that bypasses Vale, which with Flower Trick is crit is guaranteed. It's a matter of if he can do enough damage to either Ursaluna or Ogerpon before Meowscarada goes down. And if they can't, then it is going to be very, very difficult for them to find another answer to Ursaluna. Which is why I gave this match a 55-45. Abbotsford is a very good player, goes absolutely nuts in his prep, but Sunnyside overall having the matchup bonus and the just easier time prepping, I'm going to give it to Sunnyside. And for the next one, Worcester Roopers versus the Alabama Alakazams.
Yeah, this one was another like very awkward one. There were some like going ahead of time back when we were trying to figure out like how we really feel about all these matchups. There were a few that really stumped us, and this was one of them, especially for me. It's that both players. I mean, this is the finals rematch. This is the game of the week. This is the this is the matchup we all want to see how play out. And Worcester's coming off the win, Alabama's is coming off the loss, and a lot of it is like Alabama's now looking for revenge. And so that with that coming into the play, he's going to be much more calculated. He's going to be prepping a bit more, and I think he's going to be giving 120% for this fight. So I think that's playing a huge factor into this.
For sure.
But at the end of the day, Worcester's did win the finals. His team is looking really nice with the Mamoswine, with the Latios, with the Ogerpon. I mean, Alabama, like a lot of his defensive pressure, like a lot of his defensive core is really being held up by Jirachi this matchup. And even then, like it's still going to get smacked by Iron Treads and Mamoswine. But Alabama has such a huge weakness to Ogerpon with Cornerstone. They can come in and really do a lot of damage. And again, Alabama's only good answer to it is the Jirachi. And Weavile, if Weavile gets in, right? Like, because I don't believe Rock resists Ice.
I do not believe so.
So I believe Weavile can come in and hit the Ogerpon, but Ogerpon might be able to live the hit, and if it lives the hit, Weavile's not living anything. So Alabama has to be really smart about pivoting, has to be really good at knowing, like, at properly calculating things out, properly planning things, and so on and so forth. And I do think Alabama is the caliber of player to do this. But with that said, I think I was a much more neutral on this matchup because I think Worcester is coming off that champ diff, right? Like he has the champ diff. His team is really nice. He has so many different modes. He can set up sweep with Shell Smash Poltergeist. He has Mamoswine. He has both the defensive core of like Wheezing and even comes in with like Tauros to intimidate things. But I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so looking at Alabama's side, Chi-Yu does a lot in this matchup. It can threaten the Ogerpon, it can threaten Treads, Latios, Mamoswine, Armor Rouge, Rotomo, Poltergeist, before Terra. The only thing about that is that it almost has to be Scarfed if it wants to do any of what I just said. And even then, that Tauros, Paldea Aqua really kind of runs Chi-Yu, even if it is Scarfed, because Chi-Yu can't really touch it. So as long as that Tauros, Paldea Aqua is there, Chi-Yu doesn't do anything. And then it just relies on that it all really relies on if Tauros goes down, then Chi-Yu can come in with Choice Scarf, and as long as Alabama plays it smart, he can pick up the win. But with it being so difficult for finding the pivots in the path to get that Chi-Yu to really be the win condition, it is definitely going to be a tough time. That being said, I think Alabama coming off the championship loss in a devastating fashion, as he made a couple misplays towards the beginning, which set him on the back foot super early. I think he's going to come back looking for revenge, being bloodthirsty, so I'm going to give it a 60-40 in Alabama's favor.
Yep, I gave it a 50-50. I think Worcester is still a really good player. But Alabama is coming for revenge, so I'm going to 50-50.
All right, next is Vancouver Valiants versus the Pittsburgh Scissors. And looking at this one, it was another sort of odd matchup. However, definitely in the matchup itself is in favor of one more so than the other. With Spectrier, Iron Boulder, and Archaladon looking very, very formidable against the Valiants team. Crocodile being the most outstanding answer to all three of those, especially if it's Scarfed. If it gets one kill, gets Moxie boost, then it just kind of sweeps the rest, but it has to be very careful considering webs from Galvantula can easily ruin that plan, as well as a Clefable or an Amoonguss coming in can also very well thwart all that, especially with the defensive backbone of Cresselia, Appleton, Quagsire, even a bulky Gouging Fire. It can be very difficult for Pittsburgh to break things. However, Pittsburgh definitely has the much better offensive presence and can easily start rolling along with Spectrier if it gets some Grimnaze up.
Yeah, I think it's as far as like skill difference, I actually think like they're pretty equal like caliber players, so it's not, we can't really give an edge as far as player goes. Maybe Valiant is better, but I'm not well versed enough to really say.
Mm-hmm.
So with no player edge, you just have to look straight at drafts, and I think like I agree entirely. I think the draft is definitely more on the Pittsburgh favored matchup. I mean, Cresselia has to do overtime as far as defensive core, and can't really do anything with that Spectrier. Golden Go has a really hard time doing anything in this matchup, even though that it can technically deal with the Boulder. Boulder is still probably always going to live a hit because its defenses aren't that nice, and that requires Golden Go to be Scarf. I think a lot has to happen for Vancouver to win, and then you also have the issue of like you said, Pittsburgh can bring in so many more different Pokemon. Even Hitmonlee could come in if Pittsburgh sees like an angle with maybe like a close combat onto the Crocodile or something along those lines. But Vancouver is pretty much limited to like 6 or 7 Pokemon in this matchup, and we're being so obvious, it makes the prepping much easier for Pittsburgh. So I think we both agreed on the matchup being a 55-45 ratio.
Mm-hmm.
I find it very hard for Vancouver, Vancouver to do something insane, but I do believe that they both can win. Vancouver can definitely win by like a 3-0 or 4-0 even. Like I wouldn't put it out of the question. I just think it's easier for Scissors to come in and like mollywop the entire match.
For sure. The next matchup being the Kingston Marshadows versus the Luscious Lopunnies.
Yeah, I'll start us off with this one. So I never fought Kingston in the last season, and I was in a different division with Lopunnies, so I don't have first-hand experience with either of these players, but I have watched enough of both of their games to have a good understanding of, okay, these are really good players, and while I don't know if they've ever faced off against each other like this is going to be one interesting matchup, and I'm one for one and excited for this. So we have both teams having some nice defensive core. You have Lopunnies having the DoD, Skarmory, and Blissey. And for Kingston, you have the Swampert, you have the Corviknight, you have, you even have Colossal and Mienshao for the regenerated to pivot. I do believe that defensive core on Lopunnies is much better, though. However, with that said, Kingston's offensive pressure is very scary this match because of the Dragapult. Dragapult is the key factor on the win condition for both of these. If Kingston can come in and really play around that Dragapult and play very well, I think Kingston can come in and really win with like a 5-0, 4-0, even a 6-0 differential if he plays around that Dragapult really well. And with Lopunnies, Lopunnies has to like dedicate 2, 3, 4, even 5 of its mines to really be able to do some damage to this Dragapult, to really whittle it away. And I think this matchup really depends on how both players handle this Dragapult. Does Kingston properly maneuver it and, really get it into a position to win? Or can Lopunnies stop the tyrant that is Dragapult and put it in its tracks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with Rabambi on Luscious's side, setting up webs, while Kingston does have the Corviknight and is able to defog, and just overall kind of counter lead if they want to Suicide Lead Rabambi Webs, which could then potentially lead to just Dragapult into Sub-Hex Wisp. It's definitely a lot easier for Kingston as long as he can correctly pivot around that Dragapult in game. However, because it is difficult for him to do that, I do think it makes it easier for Luscious to kind of plan around and be able to dedicate certain mons to taking that down. However, as you said, having to dedicate so much to one mon leaves room for a lot of other mons to do so much work on that team. That makes it a really even matchup. However, since that Dragapult is such a force, and I think Kingston will be able to go around that fairly easily, I gave it a 60-40 matchup in favor of Kingston.
I was a bit more modest. I gave it a 54-45 matchup in favor of Kingston. I think Lopunny's is really good of a player. I think she's coming into this with a lot to prove that she deserves to be here. And I think she does. And I think this is going to be a very important matchup for her. And because I think if she can pivot around the Dragapult properly and really show us what she's capable of, I think she will be a huge threat this entire season. And I think this matchup is really going to be interesting to watch.
All right, next on the docket is the Virginia Zekroms versus the New York Malamars. And going based off of the first look, Malamars is overwhelmingly the favorite matchup-wise to go into Virginia's team. Looking at the Valiant, Bax, and Glowking, obviously Glowking and Baxcalibur having chilly reception, and then just Bax being in snow is crazy. Is a crazy combo going into a lot of his mons like Tinglu, Articuno, Thundurus, Shaman, and just being able to hit things hard in general is insane, as well as Valiant having the other coverage to take care of the Chinpow, the Tinglu, the Empoleon, the Ogidogi, the Tatsugiri. It is going to be very, very difficult for Virginia to get past those three mons, as well as the defensive backbone of Primarina, Heatran, Lando T, intimidating things, and Knuckle Stack. It is going to be very, very difficult for Virginia to break that core. However, I do think it is possible with Chien-Pao being fast and being able to hit things very, very hard with its defensive lowering ability, and just overall being super, super powerful. There's definitely a way that it can break through, but it is going to be very difficult for Virginia to do that.
Yeah, Regieleki is one thing that I might note is that Regieleki is the only hazard removal on Malamar's side, and that is something very notable. Is if Regieleki doesn't come or whatever the case may be, Tinglu has a really, really good matchup into Regieleki, and so it can hazard stack on it. And if Regieleki comes in onto the Tinglu, it can just earthquake it, obviously, taking no damage in return. So there is a chance for hazard stacking to really be the win condition for Virginia. But even with that said, I think Malamars has such a huge balance. New York is such a balanced team. It can play defensively. It has such good switch-ins that not only can take hits, but then can dish out so much damage that makes Virginia have to play in overtime consistently, always having to think 2 or 3 turns ahead of what Malamars is wanting to do.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as I really like Virginia's team, I think Virginia has such a really nice, it's also a nice balanced team. I think Malamars just is what Virginia's team, but better.
Yeah, I have the matchup going to New York by 60-40. I think because Fix is such a good player, they will be able to maneuver around the strong defensive backbone and the very strong offensive pressure fairly well. However, I do still think they lose because it is so overwhelming.
Yeah, I think Virginia may be the better player. I agree, but I think that the draft, this matchup is just such a huge in favor of Malamars.
Yeah.
That I think it's very hard for Malamars to lose. But if anyone were to overcome this, it would be Virginia.
All right, and the next one being the Sin City Sableyes versus the Jersey Dracos. Off of first glance, it is very much in favor of Jersey. Looking at Sin City's team, there's not too much cohesion going on, which makes it really, really tough for things like Greninja and Metagross and Kyurem and Dragonite and even Mew to really go well with each other and work the way that I think Sin City is going to want them to. Meanwhile, Jersey having the ability to pivot with Slowking and Cyclizar and Scizor, and as well have a good defensive backbone with Garchomp, Slowking, Glamora, Sylveon, and just overall the offensive pressure that Darkrai and Ogerpon Hearthflame, as well as Garchomp and Scizor provide, is just going to be way too much for too little synergy. But on Sin City's team, I think it's going to overwhelm him. Both of these teams are promoted from Kalos, so that's going to make the matchup a lot more even player-wise, but I do think that because it's so even player-wise, that the matchup on Jersey's side is too overwhelming to not pick him.
Yeah, like if we can't really give an edge as far as player strength goes, then you have to just look at the matchup as is. And I think, yeah, Sin City is not happy about where he drew week 1. Maybe week 2 and onwards, his matchups are more favorable. Maybe he knows what he's doing with his team, and who knows, he might even come out with the victory this week. You know, you never say never. But I do think Dracos has such a strong edge over this matchup that you would really have to fumble the bag as far as Dracos goes, or Sin City has to really show us something to really put a difference. So I have the favorite as Dracos is 70-30.
And I
think that
I have it at 65-35, just because it is closer, and while it is overwhelming, I think Sin City can potentially find a way, even with little synergy.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's definitely avenues where Sin City can come up with a victory. I really like Draco's team.
And for the final matchup, our final game of the week, the players that can't seem to stop fighting each other, the Frderick Klefkis versus the Charleston Chestnuts. I'll let you start this one off.
Yeah, this is actually very even. I think as far as player skill goes, I think Klefkis is a bit better, but I don't think that matters a whole lot in this matchup. I think both of them have such really good and unique play styles. I think Klefkis has such strong, has good speed with the Dio speed and Torn T, and then above that starts outmatching Chestnut's pound for pound at every step of the way. Where Charleston's only real speed ability is Sneezer's Unburden, but you can only do that once, and there's multitude of ways of Frderick to being able to deal with it. But before I get ahead of myself, Charleston does have some nice cohesion. He has 2 Unburden Mons. He has the ability to pivot with Rotom Wash. He has a good defensive Pokemon in Amanda Buzz. I mean, that thing is taking hits for days. Latias can be defensive. It can be offensive. It can be a pivoter. And then Reverie can also sweep. SQ can Belly Drum if it's feeling fruity. And you can never, ever, ever forget about Ursula to Blood Moon. That thing will come in, set up a Calm Mind, get some healing off, Blood Moon you and Earth Power. Those 4 moves will always just do something. So I think that this matchup is very, very even. Player skill is very high. I think that this is going to be a very volatile matchup. I think there's going to be it's going to be a bloodbath. I think it's going to have everyone watching. We're going to really want to see what happens, how it happens. I'm excited.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Seeing the Tusk, Dio Speed, Tornadus Therian, Ogerpon Milotic, Cord, there's a bunch of tanky mons, a bunch of mons that can not only put in work as defense, but also put in overtime on offense, and Crocolore even being such a low point mon, being able to Terra and having the ability to regenerate health and just sit there on many things, definitely is a nice plus and really good value for such a low tier mon. And the cohesion on Charleston's side is remarkable, like you said. Being able to have the speed boosting and potential to come in and sweep in one turn is definitely a very big plus to have. Doing it so naturally with Rillaboom and Sneasler is plus as well. With Blood Moon, as you said, being able to just come in, set up, and be a very, very big threat. However, this matchup is so even, and these players are both so skilled in their own right. With I believe splitting the series so far, or close to it, 2-1, I think, in the favor of Klefkis. It'll definitely be a very interesting matchup, which is why it is one of our game of the weeks. I gave it a 50-50 shot, as I think both of these players kind of forming their rivalry is going to push them both to be on top of their game for this week.
Yeah, and I gave it a slight edge to Klefkis at 55-45. I think at least in this matchup, Klefki's draft looks a lot better. I do believe Charleston is definitely a good draft, and I definitely think Charleston can come in with a win, 2-0 him, 2-3-0 him, something like that. But I think Klefki's has an easier time. I mean, Dio Speed can really put in so much extra work, put up either hazards or whatever the case it needs. It can do so many different modes, and that Charleston can't really prep for them all. And then when worst comes to worst, you have Great Tusk, and Great Tusk will start running the game if left on Chuck. So I think it's 55-45, but honestly, like you've been saying this entire time, it is such a hard call. It can go either way. It is going to be a bloodbath.
And with that, that is our week 1 pick'ems for the PBO, and we'll be back next week doing the same thing. Have a good day.
Thank you for watching.